The Rebel Capitalist Show.
On a recent podcast, you were talking about if the SJWs, we'll call them, that are out there, what would they have thought of slavery if they
Oh, yeah.
lived back in, let's say, the 1800s, the
It's
early
so funny you bring this up
1800s?
because I almost went into this just now, and I thought,
Yeah, please do, because
I
that
thought,
was
I
such
don't
a
know if
that was
George
such
would
an
think-
awesome thought, and you articulated it so well. If you could do that again for my viewers, that would be great.
Absolutely. I was riffing off a series of tweets by a professor at Princeton named Robert George. And he said that he asks this series of questions to his students. He says something like, suppose it's 1835 and you're in the United States. Would you have been an opponent of slavery and actively fighting against it? And he says, every single hand without fail goes up.
Right.
Oh, they all would have been fighting against slavery. And he says, but you know what? I don't believe you. I do not believe you. Because here's what I know. The Liberty Party, which was the abolitionist political party, never got more than 2% of the vote. And actually, abolitionists, even in the North, were unpopular. I mean, yeah, there were people in the North who were against slavery. And some of them were against it just because they didn't want black people moving to different parts of the country where they wanted to move. But yeah, I mean, maybe they didn't want to see the slave power expand or whatever. But actually, outright abolitionists were very unpopular in the North. I mean, obviously in the South, but also in the North. So he says, given that that's a fact, it's highly unlikely that by pure coincidence, I happen to have in my classroom right now the exact people who would have been in that 2% in this day and age. Okay, that's not likely.
Right.
So he says, for you to prove to me that you would actually have been against slavery and actively fighting it in those days, you have to show me today in the here and now some position that you hold that has caused you to lose friends, lose influence in whatever influence you've had, that has caused you tremendous personal inconvenience and sacrifice, that you have stuck to, something that is unpopular, an opinion that is not shared by all the entertainment world, by academia, by the popular press. Show me an opinion that you have that meets all these requirements in this day and age, and then maybe I'll believe you would have been an abolitionist. And of course, none of them can, because 99% of them believe whatever every musician thinks. And I'm sorry, in the 19th century, those people were not, not that we had that many, but the celebrities, such as they were not leading a charge against slavery. And that to me is the revealing thing. Now, whereas the very people in our society, like me and others, who are preposterously accused of racism by losers, we're the ones who by far are the most likely to have been against slavery, because I have no fear whatsoever when it comes to holding unpopular views. I delight in contradicting the media and the entertainment world and all the corporate CEOs. And frankly, I don't want to be friends with somebody who's going to have a personal problem with that. So I meet all the requirements, but very few people do.
Yeah, you have to be very disagreeable, I think, in your nature. Ironically enough, Trump probably would have been the most anti-slavery guy, but who knows?
He doesn't mind thumbing his nose at everybody. You have to be that kind of person, not a people. A people pleaser would not have been an abolitionist.
Yeah, exactly. So going back to the earlier question, and I know you are a historian, so I want to try to pick your brain on something else I've been thinking about. Did you go back and look at how the Spanish flu was handled in 1918 and then compare that to what's going on today and try to draw some conclusions?
No, I haven't. But the only thing I can say is I saw an interesting juxtaposition of Washington Post headlines the other day. So early on, we got a headline saying, we need to remember the history from the Spanish flu because it shows that masks are useless. And then that was before we were told that we had to wear them and that they were going to save lives.
Right.
Then we get the headline, we have to learn from 1918 about the importance of masks. Okay. I guess the history changed in 7 months.
Yeah, it is completely cherry picking. I asked that question to Robert Barnes, who's a lawyer that really knows kind of the history of law. And he said the big difference, although they did have lockdowns and they did have mask mandates, there was nothing at the state level. And there was obviously nothing at the federal level. It was all just based on what the city wanted to do. And that was the real big difference. And then I don't think they ever required businesses to shut down. They just restricted some of their hours. So, but you do have obviously a lot of opinions on 9/11, and the freedoms and liberty that we lost as a result of something like the Patriot Act. So that's one thing that I've been trying to think through as well. We've had all this massive, unprecedented government overreach in 2020, and we're still seeing it in 2021. How do you think that plays out long term?
Well, to me, the key thing is the precedent that's been set.
Yeah.
Because I think in principle, we knew in the back of our minds that if push came to shove, the political class would claim that in principle, they own everything.
Mm-hmm.
In principle, they can commandeer whatever they want. And I guess I figured that in principle, they probably thought that, but there was no real way for them to implement something like that. But now they've basically said, we are ultimately in charge of your business, and not just in terms of laying down a maximum occupancy number for fire code reasons, but that we can actually tell you whether you can open or not, how many people can come in, and how many people per square foot you can have. And I remember in Alachua County, which I think is where Gainesville is, the city council or whatever it is, they came up with 1 person per 1,000 square feet would be allowed in retail establishments toward the beginning of this thing. And they were asked where they got that number. That's I'm sure science gave them that number. And the answer they gave was, well, we chose that number because it makes the math really easy. These are the people who ran this thing. These are the people. These big scientists are the ones who ran it. But yeah, to me, it's just hanging over our heads forever is the idea that they could do this again if they wanted to. So who wants to be a restaurateur now? You operate on razor thin margins, even in the best of conditions. And now you could be told, yeah, you can't really, like, for example, I just saw there's a guy who runs I think it's called Nick Filet. His guy's first name is Nick, and he sells filet mignon sandwiches. I've never heard of anything like this, but I want one instantly. He sells a surf and turf sandwich. It's filet mignon with lobster.
Wow.
What? This is amazing, right? Well, this guy was operating in Pennsylvania. And then they told him, well, you can't have any dine-in. It's got to be, it's like a fast casual restaurant, but you can't have dine-in. You got to just do takeout. And he said, the problem with that is the kind of food I serve is by far served best fresh. It really doesn't lend itself to takeout that well. So he finally decided to heck with it, and he just moved to Florida. And so Governor DeSantis did an interview with him that appeared on Twitter where he talked about, and where he said to the governor, thank you for letting me run my business. And I'm so thrilled to be down here and everything's great. So he set up his establishment down here. But again, if you're operating on a razor thin margin as it is, and then they take away something as simple as indoor dining, they still let you function, but they just take away indoor dining. That can be what destroys you, just like that. So there are so many businesses that cater to the public that have to think twice about whether they expand, whether they even start up again. And this affects the standard of living of everybody, because now goods and services that would have been available are not available. So those services now are scarcer, will command a higher price, will have less choice, lower quality, whatever. Just even on that level, just that level alone concerns me. What does that do to the entrepreneurial spirit?